Thanks a lot, David, for your talk. For the Q&A. Thanks for making Rails, because I think most of us feel pretty privileged to be able to do Ruby development. I know when I started learning Ruby in 2002, it was like a language that I would have paid to develop in. And now we get to make money doing it, which is really awesome. I'm not actually going to talk too much about Obtiva at all. I want to clear up one point of confusion, though, is that his initials are DHH, but mine were DHH first. And there's just constant confusion on the internet about who is who. So I know it's a big problem for my team, but they're just trying to clear that up. So I don't know if anyone in this room has ever heard of a guy named Uncle Bob. I'm sure a few people have. How many people were at Agile 2008 in this room? Okay, cool. Because I'm going to totally rip off his keynote from Agile 2008. Closer? Closer. There we go. Sorry, my voice is kind of hosed from last night. I went to my first high school football game in 13 years and screamed my lungs out. All right, is that better? That's good. All right, so Uncle Bob, he's basically one of the best speakers you'll ever hear. So if you ever get the chance, listen to him, because he's totally entertaining. He's totally been in this business for a long time. Maybe he's one of the best because of what David was saying, as far as he's lasted so long. And so many other people kind of lose their way. One of the things that he does is talk off index cards and throw them in the air after he finishes each point. So I'm kind of copying that. Because I'm not a great speaker. And I'm trying to kind of learn from him, and because he's insanely entertaining, like I was saying. This isn't really working without a wireless, though. Anyway, so one of the metaphors that he talked about at the Agile conference, that he's talked about before in his blog, is that of surgeons, and comparing software developers to surgeons, and just talking about what surgeons do to do their work, and what we can, like I said, what we can learn from that. Should have totally pre-ripped these. Anyway, or actually used business cards, but I couldn't find any this morning. Anyway, so doctors' time is really constrained, just like our time is really constrained, although they have much more important jobs than us in general, because they're actually trying to save people's lives. And I'm thinking of surgeons specifically, and the type of intensive, focused work that they have to do. And one of the very simple kind of mantras that Uncle Bob talked about, and kind of the lessons, he took us back through history and when it was discovered that washing your hands for a doctor, scrubbing in to a surgery, reduced the mortality rate. Specifically, it was around mothers and childbirth. But anyway, I'm sure that there was times during that transition period of when it was this questionable practice to wash your hands, where patients were like, dude, just get started, I'm in pain here, let's go. And doctors had to make a choice. Am I going to wash my hands and delay gratification for this person, or am I going to take the time, wash my hands because I believe this is the right thing to do? And I know that we feel that pressure too. Often I know, at least on my team, we're working with small business people. They're not small people, small businesses. But these people, like for my first 5 years of my career, I worked in large businesses, and so if you screw up, you're really not seeing the person that's hurting from that necessarily. Maybe you could say that it's hurting the end user, or it's hurting the billionaire investment banker, but ultimately it's harder to kind of care about that. Nowadays I work with people who, if you screw up, you're hurting their livelihood, the person that's trying to make $1 million a year, and it's just them and you building something. And so they're going to be pressuring you, right? A lot of us, even if you don't work with people, with businesses like that, you're going to have a manager pressuring you whose reputation is is on the line for this project. So you have a decision about whether you're going to do the right thing pretty much every day. And I know I've fallen, it's a temptation. I mean, it's just, you have to make that call about, am I going to hack something in, or am I going to just forge ahead without writing tests? Or am I going to do the right thing and be disciplined and wash my hands? So the great metaphor about this whole thing is you want to have a sterile operating room, right? Like, I don't want to like jump into an operating room with my hands dirty and screw everything up. I want to come into an operating room that's clean, and we're not going to hurt the patient, right? And in this case, our patient is our software, and the sterile environment is having a test suite. One of the awesome things about Rails, even though, there's been a lot, even though, some people feel kind of really badly about the way Rails does tests and fixtures and all that good stuff, and we've got awesome work in our community with RSpec and shoulda and all sorts of different ways of testing things. But Rails, I've never worked with a with a test framework, with a web framework that had testing so baked into it. And I know, like, I've consulted at a .NET shop who was just thinking about Rails because it's the only test framework that, I did it again, the only web framework that had testing baked into it because they believe so strongly in testing. So that's a great thing about Rails. And it's right there, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be using it. Okay, made that point. Doctors are professionals, and I'm not going to go too far into this, but I believe that we're not really a profession yet. I think the kind of old-timer and great software developers out there think of themselves as craftsmen, or I think the craftsmanship model of apprenticeship, journeyman, master really fits for what we do. I'm not going to go much further into that, but I do think that being a good craftsman means following these practices like I'm talking about as far as working in a sterile operating environment so that you can make changes to your code base without screwing things up, without hurting your patient. So yeah, so I guess the one little tiny novel thing that I thought of for this was that I think we should probably have a Hippocratic oath for software, and that is do no harm, right? If a customer comes and asks you to add something in there, you shouldn't be injecting bugs, just as in when a doctor goes and does surgery, they shouldn't be infecting their patient. They should be improving. They should at least do no harm, right? So there's a lot of testing talks at this conference, and I'm excited about that because I think there's a strong developer testing culture in Chicago, and I think that's something that could distinguish us. Yep, said that. Jeez. Oh yeah, okay, so last thing, wrapping up, learn to keep your hands clean, right? And how a doctor doesn't just keep his hands clean. He doesn't clean his hands after the surgery. He doesn't clean his hands during surgery. And he definitely doesn't come into surgery dirty and then clean his patient after he's finished, right? You wash your hands first, right? It's just too hard to do it afterwards. And this week I probably wrote a test after I wrote the code. So it's just a constant vigilance that we have to be, but you just need to write your tests first. It just makes it so much easier to actually write the tests. So that's all I've got to say.